And so we return and begin again. Welcome to the Invisible Podcast, issue 3. We're going issue by issue, page by page, panel by panel when we have to, and most importantly, theory by theory through Grant Morrison's Invisibles, Grant Morrison and Co.'s Invisibles, that seminal comic book conspiracy counterculture classic concoction or confection of criminally underrated, it's not underrated, fun. This is the first issue, this is the issue, it's the first issue that's got its cover on. Isn't that exciting? First one that hasn't been torn off by the ravages of time, and is actually in quite nice nick. I would give this near mint. Cover again, straight into it, we're going straight into it. We got a lovely another cover by Sean Phillips. We've got our boy Dane McGowan, all orgone blue with his strange pigeon eyes floating over the Thames. That's Tower Bridge that you can see there. That's the Tower of London right in the corner. So already we've got some kind of like reimagining of the way that the London landscape looks and feels. We've got a red river. We've got the power structures, the kind of the kinglinesses that bind the city together right here and right weird on the front cover. This is Dane's upside down, and we're facing south. Normally this is like, if it was a map then it would be facing north, but it's not. We're facing south because Dane's world is being turned upside down. So we're on the wrong side of the river for this, really, looking the other way. And we turn the page and we get straight in to where we left off last week. This is our splash, but we've got another advert for Sandman Mystery Theatre on the inside front cover. Again, they're saving a lot of money on the colour printing for the adverts. It's a kind of a boring advert. Dr. Death is writing prescriptions. There's maybe a bit of a link with some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about this episode of that, but there are better links in the other adverts. Our splash page, we get straight in to the credits. Let's read them out as is only fair. We're on Down and Out in Heaven and Hell, Part 2. Grant Morrison writer, Steve Yoel artist, Daniel Vozzo colour, Electric Crayon with the colour separations, Clem Robbins the letterer. They've kind of, he bless him. Clem Robbins is fairly he's not the guy from Blondie. He's used a particularly difficult to read lettering font for his own name because he's a humble kind of guy. Clem Robbins, letterer, Julie Rottenberg, the assistant editor, and Stuart Moore, the editor. The Invisibles, of course, created by Grant Morrison. The way this page is split out is interesting, right? So you've got that one long, thin panel, and then all of that throws us back into where we are. We've got this kind of imposing view of the scary fox hunter guy from last issue behind. All we can see is boots, these boots that are made for walking, these boots that are stamping on the human face forever. And then on the counterposed on this other side is this totally empty, you might even say blank space that's been filled somewhat with the credits and the title, but there's a lot of empty space around those credits, especially when you contrast it with the very dense background that's in the other panel. And which is somewhat echoed in the lettering style of the title there. Well, come on then, you disgusting little oik, says the scary man. Make the effort to put some sport into this. Oik is kind of like a general term that we have for, like a posh guy throws at a lower class guy. That kind of class relationship is very sort of clear and clearly delineated through the use of that word. But also oik kind of just means, oik is like a public schoolboy word. Like, it's not just a posh person word, but it specifically refers to people who are kind of not in our school. They belong to a different school. They're from a different college, you might even say, if you're talking about a posh boarding school or university. And that's not an irrelevant choice of words, I think we can probably say. Over the page, straight in. I can't promise anything, but hopefully this episode is going to go a bit quicker than the past couple. This issue 3 of The Invisibles is much less dense than the other two, or at least it's got some really dense bits in it. But around that, there are some kind of slightly bigger, broader action sequences, in which we've got a lot of space, like we see on that title page there. yeah, this is kind of about, this issue is, if anything, it's about the themes that we've been exploring so far, pushing outwards a little bit, not necessarily outwards into any thematic areas, but into just a different mode of reading, a different way of apprehending the things that we're being shown. Dane sees that Dane thinks that, like, it looks like Tom's dead. Dane sees these horrible hunter guys with knives, and they're quite multiracial they're quite multiracial for a hunting pack, hunting squad, a hunt, Silent Sea. The old man's too easy, too easy, but somehow I think you'll be even easier, a skinny little fuck up like you. Yeah, bastards! Leave him alone, you bastards, leave him alone! Oh, I forgot to do my Scouse accent. Fair play to the lad. Dane charges right in. He's faced with 4 armed people. His mate is, as far as he knows, dead. And he doesn't blink, he doesn't drop for a second, he just charges in. He hasn't got a huge amount to lose, to be fair, at this point. So maybe he's just thinking, well, if you've killed Tom, then, vengeance and righteous immolation and impalement on the end of this knife is going to do me some good. But the leader of the hunt, like, very effortlessly backhands him into this pile of bins. As he goes into the bins, there's an explosion. It's not even bins, actually, it's just bin bags. Black refuse sacks. Like we get here. Do you have them where you live? Of course you do. There's like an explosion, like a flurry of rubbish as he's thrown into the bags, because people haven't been tying them up properly, I guess, or they've been torn open by rats or foxes or seagulls. Don't really get seagulls here in London where this takes place, but you do get them where I am. We have a banana, a leaf, some rubbish, like some rubbish paper, and a broken tin can, and yeah, an apple core. Nice little detail. We've been looking at apples the past couple of episodes, haven't we? The apple symbolism is quite important to Dane's progression, and kind of the way that the people who are perhaps manipulating that progression are making him do what he wants. And now he's headfirst in the rubbish, and he's headfirst in the rubbish, and you get an apple core, like a rotten little bit of apple. These pages, there's 2 5-panel pages on this first spread. The rhythm of the storytelling here bounces along really nicely, like already a much opener lick than we've been used to in these previous episodes. I reckon that this has probably got something to do with Steve Yarwell being a little bit up against his deadlines now that he's lost his, like the kind of the run up that you get before a new series is published or commences is over now. He's in it. You'll see that even more in the next issue, in issue 4, but in this one he's just letting his panels breathe a bit more. Ironically, he's getting a lot heavier on the backgrounds. Look at that brick wall. It's great. It's a very boring but kind of like deliberate grid of brickwork on this back page. In fact, on all of these pages where relevant, it's really been they've been thrown in, they've been picked out on purpose. He's not yet doing the floor, though. We'll come to that in a minute. So Dane is thrown into these bin bags, and it's really nicely done. He kind of seems to be merging with the bin bags, and the bin bags in his stunned state even seem to be kind of informing his point of view through as he kind of looks at the baddies leering over him, who, again, they're a multiracial bunch. And the leader guy, who with his smug grin says, one day when you least expect it will be there. Even your life doesn't belong to you. There's nothing of Dane's outside of Dane's being which Dane can claim. There's nothing. This is a very so we talked about how these aristocratic murder games are about stamping ownership onto the landscape, and not just onto the landscape but onto the feudal subject, onto the villagers represented by the foxes. Obviously the fox represents the traditional fox of the fox hunt, represents their wiliness, their desire for freedom, their ability to slink between the hedgerows and to write their own rules. The point of the fox hunt specifically is that gets ritually sacrificed, that as an act of social spectacle, this poor fox is being torn to shreds by a well-drilled pack of hounds every week, or however often they like to do it in the hunting season, as a means of saying to the feudal subject, to the the peasants You do not belong to yourself. You're like your hopes and dreams of escape and of something better. We will tear it up in front of you and then make you clean it up, make you look after the dogs that we value more than you, who are involved in this process of cleaning up. Asidely, like the famous day for hunts is Boxing Day, the day after Christmas, the 26th of December. Is this Christmas Day? I mean, is this Boxing Day? So does that mean that when Dane and Tom did the blue mold last issue, was that Christmas Day? It wouldn't not work, would it? There's very little, like, London looks very Christmassy at Christmas time. Even back in the 90s, there was probably, maybe even more back in the 90s, actually. There was a lot of Christmas shenanigans going on, which was definitely absent. Although maybe it would explain what those people were doing. This could have all happened over Christmas, you know? It could have all happened over Christmas. You're nothing at all, says the scary, horrible hunt leader as he literally sinks backwards into the shadows. And we get here, so the way that we have the, on this final panel of this sequence, the black, like we had on the previous page where we had the big white blankness contrasting with the thin strip panel. We've got a thin strip of this gridded detail again, but dominated by a black shadowy panel, a very kind of negative, despairing, empty space that Dane is told in no uncertain terms he belongs to. Bastard, he says again. Bastard? Hey, all right, you bastard. I can't, like, the Scouse accents on this show are worth the entrance alone. Fucking bastard. Oh shit, Tom are you? So Dane is crying, you know, he's been humiliated, he's been beaten, he's bleeding from his nose, bless him. And now we see that there's cobbles. This is a cobbled alleyway. As we established, I think that Dane woke up just off Lambeth Hill. He only turned like a corner to get to this cobbled alleyway. I don't know where he is. To be fair to me, there are quite a lot. It doesn't seem like, you wouldn't imagine it, but in the city of London, a lot of just like little alleyways where you wouldn't even think of it have got cobbled or set paving in the floors, so which kind of looks a bit kind of like charming and old school. It's not that uncommon. The ones which are kind of like known and kind of catalogued, but it could be anywhere really. If I was going to bet, I would say that this was Skinner Lane, but I'm not betting. It's a cobbled alleyway not far from where I think he was on Lambeth Hill. Otherwise, it could be Wardrobe Street. Like Wardrobe Street, you've got Knight Rider Lane right next to it. Knight Rider Street. Sorry. If it's not Skinner Street, I think that it might be Wardrobe Avenue, which has got the local Church of Scientology, a big church, and a street running parallel with it called Knight Rider Street. These are riders, you know, yeah, they're kind of like horse riding huntsmen without the horses. So they could be there. I don't know where this is. To be honest, I've lost track of the geography at this exact moment of where Tom and Dane are. And we've got and Tom is just, all we've got of Tom is his Obi-Wan Kenobi style, and this is very obvious. He's, you know, it's just his jacket, his brown cloak is all that's left of him. And Dane is worried about Tom, and he goes, Tom, are you okay? And he picks it up, and it's an empty overcoat, empty brown overcoat, and he's surprised, and don't know, but it's all right, because look, Tom's appeared. He thought that Tom was dead. Tom goes, croak not, Black Angel, I have no food for thee, which is another one of his Tom and Bedlam lines. The meaning of it is fairly clear, I think, here. And Tom had vanished. He'd like teleported away. He was apparently not in any danger from these hunter dudes, even though he was scared of them last time. We know Tom's got cool magic, but that cool that he can just vanish in front of the eyes of four huntsmen, multiracial huntsmen. Tom's a cold. Hand me my coat, boy, else I freeze here. And Dane's like, what the fuck were you? They would have killed me. And Tom's like, oh, were you worried about me? Thought you didn't care for no one. I don't look. And then something interesting happens, and Dane picks up this little badge. It's a little white or blank badge that he picks up off the floor. A bit more on that later. It's a badge, but there's nothing on it. And that's great. The dialogue on this page was, so we're back in sort of like dirty reality. We've got cobbled streets and we've got gridded walls. So there's all of these straight lines filling the background of these panels. We're grounded again. Except for here, where he finds the blank badge, and suddenly there's no background or no ground, and suddenly just Tom and Dane are frozen in empty space, snapped in a moment of time. And the dialogue's great. Dane's exposed his care for Tom. Tom has spotted it, and Tom is kind of taking the piss out of it like you would. And Dane's like, he's a bit pissed off about it. Nobody's got one good word for the younger generation today, but all they need is the threat of death to get them going. And he's like, oh yeah, so where were you when they were knocking the shit out of me? Thanks a lot. And Tom sort of realises that he's pushed it a little bit too far and goes, you're a good boy deep down, you're like a son to me. As soon as he says son, Dane bristles again. Fuck off. And he shoves off and he goes, I'm out of here before they come back, you can do what you want. And he just pushes off, slouches off. Moody teenager Dane again, who we love so much. And Tom looks after him with some concern. And all of this feeds into what happens in a little while. And then over the page, we're on to page 6, which is this one here. We'll get to him in a minute. This is one of the densest pages that we've come across yet. Again, I'm hoping that we'll be able to make this episode a little bit smaller than the 2-hour marathons that we've had heretofore, but not on the strength of this page, which is a really, really dense one. Okay, so they've gone, or they were, I don't know exactly where they were in the previous scene, but they were roughly around Lambeth Hill, let's say. They've gone westward again, quite a long way westward, and now they are in St James's Park. St James's Park is right near Hyde Park, it's right near the Palace of London, but more importantly, now I haven't been able to directly identify that building there. If you have any idea what it is, then please do write in and let me know. I think they're in St James's Park, and that this building that you can sort of see in the distance is either like the Duck House. It's not really, because that's not what it looks like, but that's like the most famous building in St James's Park. I think that this is looking out of the park towards Whitehall and Downing Street. I think that kind of makes much more sense thematically. I think that's kind of where we are, and the kind of the imposing sort of classical, like neoclassical architecture that we've got going on there. I think it's meant to be that. I think this is all being conducted in the shadow of the halls of corridors, if you will, of power here in the centre of London. We're literally right between where the Queen is and where the Prime Minister is. Basically, we're between Downing Street and Buckingham Palace. You've got St James's Park. And that's where I think they are. Tom is saying, it feels good to have survived another year. Earth waking up and yawning. And then he does a little bit of singing. Summer is a-coming in, loud now sing cuckoo. I'm not doing the song. Bloweth seed and groweth mead and springs the wood anew. So this is these are the kind of opening lines of Summer is a-coming in, which is like a really ancient 13th century or something English folk song. The lyrics that we've got here are as they are heard in the 1973 movie. It's called a movie. Why did I blank on that word? The 1973 movie, The Wicker Man. This is a very key movie for Invisible's mythology. We will get right into it in quite a few issues down the line. But for now, just let it be said that The Wicker Man, a film I'm sure you've seen, the 1973 version, the Michael Caine one, not the hilarious, memey Nicolas Cage recent one, is like a really core text, and we'll see to the Invisibles, and we'll see echoes of it throughout quite a lot of what we do. So that's what that is. Now, okay. The issue of time comes up here. As I've said, we may have just been at Christmas just before now. So we're definitely a couple of months later now. This is spring. The song Summer is coming in. Actually, it's spelled Sumer, Sumer, S-U-M-E-R, i.e. like the first human civilization, right? It's not Summer, it's Sumer. The way it was originally, the way that the earliest documents presenting the lyrics of this song appear. Is that going to be relevant in a minute? Maybe. There's a type of song, going through my notes, there's a type of song which is the French lads call a reverdy, regreening, right? It's like a song that you sing to welcome in the spring. We don't have them here because the spring's cold, but we've got like one which is like a bit of a version of one, and we call it summer is a coming in, because spring is nice, don't get me wrong, spring's great, but there's really not a huge amount to sing about until summer. So reverdis have like these, and summer is a coming in has this. Summer is a coming in is about the coming of summer, obviously, but more than that, it's about like a kind of a description and an invocation of like the general bounty of nature, kind of at its height, not at its start. There's not stuff about buds or lambs or springing or greening or leaves reawakening or that. The lyrics, like if this was of a type of the French reverdy, it would have more terms like that. It's different. It's not actually about that. The lyrics to Summer Is Coming In are much more about sexual shenanigans, basically. It's much more what's basically going on in Summer Is Coming In is a woman's tummy blooming and everyone knows that she's not married. Or if she is married, her husband's not around, so how's she pregnant? That's the subtext of Summer Is Coming In. And it's funny, it's obviously like a kind of a cheeky cuckolding song, the kind of the constant repetition of the cuckoo as being the main refrain of the song is kind of where you get that from. The Wicker Man obviously plays up the kind of the naughty countryside sex angle a lot. Now, if you kind of tie that back with the fact that when Dane was getting very cross and kind of like thought that he was coming to his end and was prepared to sacrifice his own life for his mate Tom a couple of pages ago, the word that he kept focusing on was bastard. And now we've got this. We've got Summer Is Coming In, which is like a cuck song. Forgive the use of the word. There we're getting a bit of a. So we've got bastards. We've got cucking. We've got a little bit of a peek at the tensions that are running in, for the patriarchal tensions that are running through this issue. But it doesn't stop there. There's so much more than that going on this page. So have a look down here. We've got these daffodils, daffs, lovely spring daffs. This places this around March or April, really. I mean, February maybe, late February. They're not like the first flowers that pop up. That's the crocuses, but the crocuses are just like, hey, we're here, but it's still winter. Don't get ahead of yourself. There's crocuses out now, and we're going to have snow. Daffodils are like the summer flower, the spring flower. Daffodils are the ones that pop up at springtime. I don't know how to kind of go in with this next bit. I'm not pulling in like romantic poetry out of nowhere. We've seen a little bit of it previously, not that much. We'll see a lot more of it in like coming episodes of The Invisibles. But if you think about daffodils, which are very clearly like that's in the script, there are some daffodils in the foreground. If you think about daffodils, Wordsworth, yeah. I wandered lonely as a cloud, all that. The clouds not terribly lonely. Clouds tend to come in clusters. Bill, old Billy Wordsworth. And similarly, Tom and Dane aren't alone. They're together. They're keeping each other company in a way which is really rather sweet. But there is, of course, the line, and it's interesting to note that these daffodils are beneath trees and beside a lake, and that's literally what it says in Wordsworth's poem, that these daffodils are beneath a tree and beside a lake. And that they are, of course, continuous as the stars that shine and twinkle on the Milky Way. They have these beautiful star-shaped petal arrangements. So they're stars, right? Remember what happened only a few pages ago in comic time. Tom turned off the lights in London and suddenly the Milky Way was visible. And the Milky Way is still visible beneath us here. But the sun stars and the ground stars are the same thing. bit of a hermetic as above, so below. You know what I'm on about. The other thing that your mind might turn to at this time, of course, would be Sylvia Plath's Among the Narcissi. These are Narcissi. Narcissus basically just means daffs, but generally, like in kind of like common vernacular, daffodils means yellow flute, yellow petals, and the petals are a bit fatter, a bit thicker, a bit more overlapping. These, the ones with the orange flutes and the white petals, tend to get called narcissi, right? Narcissuses. And there's not too much about narcissism here, unless maybe there's a kind of a bit in Dane here that we know needs to be broken down. I think the dialogue in this page does support it. Does support that reading. But Sylvia Plath's poem Among the Narcissi, then this Narcissi too are bowing to some big thing. It rattles their stars. And of course the other kind of figure that you have in Among the Narcissi is Percy, the old man. There's an old man bowing among the stars, among the Narcissi, among the daffs. And he's old but wise. Maybe not very long for this earth. Maybe not very with this earth, despite his kind of fascination with the stars. So remember, look to the stars, daffs, Wordsworth, narcissism maybe, hermetic appreciation of the, not just look to the stars, boy, because you can learn about magic from the stars, but look to the daffodils, boy. You can learn about magic from the flowers. You can also, as it turns out, learn about magic from the pigeons. But you recognise her now, right? Panel 2. The lady jogging past them, like the green beanie hat. It's definitely the same woman who was looking at them, or was looking at Dane, rather, from the window of the cafe, having a nice hot cuppa while he was cold outside. Maybe it was Christmas. Spring is happening. And Dane is thinking about what the hell they're going to do. He's been on the streets for months now, it looks like. Certainly some time has passed. And there's a nice... there's too much time's going past. It's winter. Too much time's going past. It's winter. Then it's spring. And I can't remember what I've been doing. Nice little kind of nod to the way that comic book characters experience time in a way which is obviously different to the way that we experience time. They only exist on the panels, and we kind of pretend that they have life between the panels and outside of the panels too, really. But from their perspective, they just do one thing and then they do another. And in the turn of a page, several months kind of passed, and how are they supposed to know what they've done there? Done then. He kicks some pigeons. Hey, don't kick at them, says Tom. The city has its own gods and spirits, electric-eyed car gods, funeral gods in the form of underground trains that burrow through the dark like old Crom Cruach, Lord Worm himself, and totem animals too. If you want to be a sorcerer, you'll learn to honour these animals. Rats there are, and pigeons. I should have just said these. Stopped. Never mind. I'm not editing this, dudes. We're just rolling. Crom Cruach, yeah, actual guy, but also Conan's guy. Crom is like a solar-phallic fertility god. He's like a male fertility god. The hidden subtext of this, there's a couple of invisible subtexts in this issue. One of them is dads and dicks, right? One of them is about the creative spurt that gives life to new things, new people, new beings, new ideas, newness, novelty. Crom Cruach is, although he's kind of like called he's a chthonic god because he kind of connects that phallus connects the earth with the sky, right? That's kind of like one of the functions of a standing stone. Crom is only really survives to us now as a standing stone. If you want to look, there's very little kind of existing extant depictions of what Crom might have looked like. He maybe looked like a worm, but that worm maybe looked like a penis, and the swirly bits that kind of are by the side of the arching shape, they could well be testicles, my friends. They just simply could. Crom could have been a dick god. Also, maybe those spirals are just the things that you see when you've been chiseling away at a stone and you're tripping your nuts off, basically. But yeah, Crom is a worm god, as long as we understand that worm as being a penis, and the kind of the association with death that comes through his association with the earth, because obviously that's where dead people go. But what am I trying to say here? He's not like it's a kind of a Christian gloss that would put Crom Cruach as being like a scary death god. Yeah, no, he's not as scary as the fact that he rides the scary tube trains of mystery. He's not necessarily that kind of guy. If not for St. Patrick's efforts, he'd probably still be above ground, and we probably would have got over the whole human sacrifice thing by now. But to kind of like Crom Cruach isn't terribly goth, and the Conan books make him seem more goth than he is, and like Anglican, English depictions of Celtic culture always make them out to be, and not just English, but kind of Anglo-Christian, always make the Irish and the Welsh and the Scottish, bless them, to be more beastly than they are. And so this kind of like, oh yes, they used to do human sacrifice, and Crom is like Conan's warrior blood god guy. Probably not. Do you know what I mean? Like, probably not. But the fact that Tom worships Crom Cruach, and Crom is basically only really known through Conan going Crom. Conan being a Lovecraftian text. It's not obviously thought of one, obviously, but Crom and the De Vermis Mysterious book that is kind of like the magic Crom book pops up in Lovecraft. Chambers is one of Lovecraft's circle. Yeah. Crom happened not like when the old ones were around, just a few remnants of them, like the kind of the biblos of the remnants are around, the fish guys that Conan is fighting and stuff. But yeah, Conan is a Lovecraftian text, and it's a text where fictional entities, fictional in scare quotes, swoosh swoosh, seem to kind of come into reality. Like Cthulhu or something, Crom is somebody that we're told is fiction, but with a little bit of reflection, you might see that he's a bit realer than you might think. Excuse me while I take a sip of lime and ginger infusion. I'm recording in the evening, so I'm not having caffeine. Beg pardon. So Dane kicks the pigeons, and Tom goes, "Don't kick the pigeons." And don't kick the pigeons. They're nice. They don't mean any harm. Rats with wings, people call them. Not without good reason, but that still doesn't make them bad. Before we turn the page, this advert here for Darth Vader, this big Darth Vader model. It's so big. They're $40. I mean, not that much. $40 was more back then. Obviously, that was when $40 was $40. But this is a numbered maquette. I don't know why I want to say maquette, but maquette of Darth Vader, and it's nicely detailed. This is 5 years before the Phantom Menace. Nobody knows yet that Darth Vader, holding his pulsing red phallus object here, has got daddy issues. Okay, the midichlorians, as we know, created Anakin in this kind of semi-divine way. He hasn't got a dad. He lacks that stability. It's one of the things that makes him go crazy and kill the younglings. And that's what we know about Anakin Skywalker. And it's just a coincidence. Like, nobody knows that then, back in 1994. Phantom Menace was still 5 years off. And yet, here he is. He crops up in this issue of The Invisibles, which is all about solar imagery, phallic imagery, and dad issues. Weird, man. Okay, we're over the page. Tom has just said, to remind ourselves, that pigeons are like the totem animals, the spirit animals of the city. invisible animals see, they're overlooked and despised like we are. Nobody sees their coming going, how would you like to fly as a pigeon, boy, and see through their eyes? And he kind of gets his hand ready. And Dane's like, yeah, whatever. Crazy old man. They're eating sandwiches as well, by the way, aren't they? And Tom is giving his bit of his sambo to pigeons, to honour the pigeons. Dane doesn't, he kicks them. Yeah, they're eating sandwiches. And so the sandwiches get knocked out of Dane's hand by Tom walloping him on the back of the head. Now, there's a few like strikes on the head in this issue. Strikes on the head are kind of a part of like some Eastern initiatory traditions, cause just the kind of all like kung fu movies, when the student is kind of getting a little bit ahead of himself, when the student kind of thinks he knows what's what and needs to take a sharp lesson, he gets a sharp knock on the head because that snaps him out. There's nothing more real than a knock on the head. A knock on the head gives you, in that instant, while you've got your head knocked, you're under no illusions. You know what reality is, you know where you are, and you know what it is to be sensate and have a body that exists where it does, no matter where its mind may think it might take itself. Tom is doing something a bit else here as well. He's not just kind of like snapping him out of a kind of a meditative state. He's doing some kind of funky kung fu to push him into one. And Dane immediately is like, he goes all crazy because he's been knocked on his head. So it's not just a smack on the head, it's a magic smack on the head. And then Tom does this weird thing and covers his eyes, calls over, and he's being nice. He's saying, don't panic, Dane, it's all right, I'm gonna help you out. Breathe deeply. He calls over a pigeon who would have been coming over anyway, because, Tom has got the magic of he can make a pigeon come by talking to him, but also he's just knocked Dane's sandwich out of his hand. All of the pigeons in St James's Park are heading their way. And one of them, Tom gets up close to it. That's not difficult to do. If the pigeon is thinking sandwich, you can get up close. Does a little bit of hand magic. And when he spies, away he flies, for time will stay for no man. In vain with cries I rend the skies, for pity is not common. One of the nicer uses of some of the Tom of Bedlam verse. And then we get this bit. Dun dun dun, Dane has got pigeon's eyes. Dane's been given pigeon's eyes by Tom's magic. This is really far out. So a few weeks ago, I was doing a podcast with my mate Rosie, and we were talking about evil children. And one of the monsters that she used as an example of evil children were the black-eyed children. And this is 1994, remember? And Dane has literally been turned into a black-eyed kid. So, it's fairly common to recognise that the kind of, just like, the mimetic drift from which black-eyed children may emerge as, whether they emerge as hoaxes or real paranormal phenomena, a type of undiscovered or undocumented cryptid bunch of shit that some kids are making up. All of the above, a terrifying new form of demonic entity. It's thought to be informed, so the early, there are earlier versions, but like the kind of the famous earliest one is 1996. This is 1994, and we're supposed to think that the precursors are Buffy and the X-Files. This is before either of those. Oh, sorry, wrong page. And Dane's got black eyes. Dane's the first black-eyed kid. And really, okay, I'm not saying that the Invisibles invented black-eyed children. I'm not saying that there's a magic spell going on here that made that happen as a viable crypto form for your the kind of like window area beings that exist anyway, particularly in North America. I think we'll get to that another day as well, but the North American continent does appear to be particularly ripe with para-existent beings, yeah, spirits, aliens, crazy things, Bigfoot, Mothman. But I am saying that we can look at the Invisibles a bit more closely, and we can maybe think about what the black-eyed children, black-eyed kids, what the H they are. Okay. Because this tells us, this is a black-eyed kid here, maybe the first black-eyed kid of the modern era, and he's got black eyes because there are bird's eyes, okay? There are pigeon's eyes. Think, okay, a pigeon is a dove, like think dove. In fact, you know, the colouring is only very mildly greying these feral pigeons, as we so kindly call them. Pigeons equals doves, right? They bring God's message to Noah after the flood, right? They're celestial dudes. This association with birds and like powerful spirits, like important spirits, messengers between the heavens and the earth, is obvious because they can fly. But more than that, certain types of bird, buzzards or vultures or birds of prey, raptors generally, or pigeons are, pigeons being a much more kind of urbane and approachable form of it. They literally take a dead body and they carry it up into the heavens. There was a dead body there, a bunch of pigeons arrived, they turned it into spirit, and the body was gone. Rats help too. But that's the process as it's been understood by the ancients, right? So we know that pigeons, feathery beasties, are celestial. They're spirit animals, literally, okay? And when one of them gets into a human, its eyes go black. If you need some proof of this, I've got some brilliant Bobsy proof. The acronym that, you know, on the internet when people are talking about black-eyed children, the acronym they use is BEK, black-eyed kids, or, if you like, BEAK. BEAK, okay? The black-eyed children are human shells possessed, not just possessed, but inhabited by bird spirits. It's not the same as birds, but bird spirit. Bird, crypto birds, like the Benny bird, who we'll see later, or the thunderbird, or the phoenix, or the angels, yeah? Like angels with burnt wings, okay? That's what the black-eyed children are. I haven't told Rosie yet, but I will, because the Invisibles, this text, which I thought I'd dig back into because it might tell us a few things about the weird ways of the world today, has given me the best theory that I've ever heard for where black-eyed children come from. So there you go. Ancient avian demons that have worked out how to dress themselves up as kids. Why do the kids look like old school kind of frontier era, like nicely turned out frontier era kids? I think it might be something to do with the eastward expansion of the United States and the number of children who just went missing on the settler trails. I think that's why. I think those are the models, those are the bodies that fell into the windows that the malignant avian spirits have climbed into and are now walking around the place, telling, like knocking on people's doors and asking to come in. Don't let the black-eyed kids in. But that's why they look old school. That's why they look sort of 19th century, sorry, yeah? Like those, like, kind of good old American settler folk wearing their best as they set off in their wagons into the wilderness and you know. So Dane, sorry, that's a digression, but also this is like a shamanic process, right? You identify with the bird, you try to see what a bird sees, you come back with insights that are useful to not just to the tribe, but to the self. Yeah, you can fix your shit by turning yourself into a bird for a while. It's not that difficult to do, but the first couple of times you do it, you might want to do it with somebody who's done it before. Just cause, yeah? Just let them clear out the area first. But yeah, you can go into a trance and become one with the bird spirit. You can do it, and you can even fly around. It's great time. Give it a try. And then we're into this cool sequence. Dane has got bird's eyes. He can see like a bird now, and this pigeon is off flying around the city, and Dane can see what he sees. Birds see in this interesting range of frequencies. All of the colours have shifted towards the red end of the spectrum a little bit. We've got oranges and reds. We've got over the page. Okay, so mob fire is the next advert. I'm having trouble fitting this one into the narrative, to be honest. Darth Vader was easy. There are some adverts coming up later that are easy. Mobfire, which I've never read. I'm not too keen on that art, but I'm sure it's not too bad. War and Peace, he's a great artist, really. That just looks a bit like he's rushed that one to me. And Gary Ushaw, who's I don't think I know his work, really. And one of these early Vertigo series, Mobfire, about occult gangsters in the East End, which... the East End. That's where the connection is. Yeah, it's like occult Cray twins. But there's only one of them. Occult Cray twin. That's what Mobfire's about. And it's one of those early Vertigo series that I haven't read. If you've read it, let me know. Tell me if it's good or not, yeah? Okay, so we've got this excellent trip sequence where Dane... Okay, so this isn't pigeon view, although it looks like it's pigeon view, but it's not. That's just what the Lloyd's building looks like from there, right? One of the most famous buildings in the City of London, completed 1978, Richard Rogers is Lloyd's building. Lloyd's of London is the foundational organisation of the city. When the City of London was becoming a thing, becoming the financial centre of not just the British Empire, but of like capitalism per se, Lloyd's was the first company. They were the ones who were like, hang on a minute. They abstracted and inserted themselves into the global trade network, and just by kind of shuffling people's funds around and saying, well, we'll insure him and we'll insure him and we'll take a percentage, blah 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 blah. Very clever financial jiggery pokery magic. They make themselves the richest motherfuckers in the whole world, and they kind of still are. You know how we've got a thing here on the Invisible podcast where we go through the Invisibles panel by panel, page by page, theory by theory, issue by issue, all of that. But one of the things that we're noticing is that it's the old magician's art of misdirection is used frequently. Yeah. So don't look over here. Look over here. Do you remember when we did the Yon thingy? The South African guy. The comic is talking about Churchill, but it sneaks in a statue of Yon Mismir, who is kind of the real guy that we should be keeping our eye on, if you like. So it pushes all of your interest over here, and really the thing you should be looking at is over here. So we get this big old bit of this archonic demon form manifesting over the skies above St. Paul's, and probably like sucking the spiritual energy of St. Paul's out more. And St. Paul's is it's important, and we'll get there in a minute. But really, the Lloyd's building. So the Lloyd's of London's made all their money, indemnifying ships against the losses at sea. What were they trading in? They were trading in slaves. This was literally the slave trade. All of the start-up cash that turned into the Industrial Revolution came from slavery. All of that free labour that nobody had to pay for. Suddenly, oh wow, there's loads of money and we can invest it in steam engines. There's nothing kind of came for free. There's nothing clever or miraculous about it. They just made a fortune off the death and misery of their fellow humans for years. And archons, yeah, cities, talismanic places of power. The Lloyd's building is a very interesting building. It's kind of an aesthetic, architectural branch of modernism called Bowellism, is how it's somewhat sardonically known. This look here, this design, where the guts, the bowels, are the all of the kind of the ducting and the infrastructure, the kind of the innards of the building are all on the outside. You can see them, yeah. So like the city and St. Paul's here, the kind of the church at the heart of the city. There's almost something a bit cozy about them. There's almost, because there's like a shared history there, and because it was so sort of important in creating this image of Britain as a state of a steady honourable presence upon the world stage. There's a shared feeling there. There's a commonality and a heritage, and there's something that connects people there, and that can have its own good. But that's not what this is about. This was 1978, right? And bowelism, the guts are on display. The greed is on display. The minute by minute hunger of abstracted digital capital, which was just about to take place when this building was made in 1978. Within 5 years or so, 6 years, the City of London was deregulated, and the world that you've got now, the one that's you're not that happy with, sprang from this. And all of a sudden, the Lloyd's building, it looks spectacular, it is impressive, but it's ugly, kind of like defiantly ugly. Ugly to the point of saying, fuck you, we'll decide what ugly is and does and means now, because we're in charge and we have been all along. That's what this building is all about. And it represents that shared basis for a state that the city provided. Not just for a state, but for a trade infrastructure that was as big as the planet. It's not about that anymore. It's about this. It's about naked greed and hunger on display. Right there. Outwards. Everyone can see it. That's what this challenging aesthetic of Richard Rogers is about. It looks like satire. It looks like you're saying through this building, look at you greedy bastards. Look at how obvious your greed is. And they're saying, yeah, we know. That's who we want to be. That's what we like. So that's the bit. It's not a coincidence that that's the bowel. That's the bowel of London, the bowel of the planet, and why it's in this page of the Invisibles. That's not pigeon eye view, though, right? That's just normal colouring. And we can see the pigeon flying past the Lloyd's building on its way eastward from St James's Park. Remember where Dane and the pigeon are. I can't identify this steeple here. It's in the city somewhere between St James's and St Paul's. Between St James's and St Paul's, and between St Paul's and the Lloyd's building, presumably. I haven't been able to find it though. I'll have another look, but I haven't been able to find it. So my tour of London is a bit lost at this point. But the red shifting pigeon vision reveals this manifesting, as I said a minute ago, archon over St Paul's, over the centre of the city, and St Paul's was created by Christopher Wren after the Great Fire of London, replacing the old St Paul's, but as a way of, it's like a coin or a magical amulet that you can walk around in. That's the social function of a church, and a many, right? It does all sorts of things. One of them is to kind of just create a concentration of psychic energy, of like hot misery for these vampiric archon beings to live off. I think we can sort of tell from these eyes, if you look closely at the archon baddie guy who approached Mr. Gelt in issue 1, their eyes are very similar. I think we can say that this is perhaps just either another archon or the same archon wearing a slightly different skin. Obviously, it's massive and invisible and sits crouched on top of St. Paul's dome. But Wren built it specifically to be, like Westminster Cathedral in the centre of town is the religious seat of temporal power, of the monarchy and the legislature and Parliament. The local church for that is Westminster Abbey. That's where the Queen gets crowned king. Oof, next time around. That's where they get crowned. That's where kind of Parliament holds its parliamentary religious shindigs. But St Paul's was created, or this new St Paul's was conceived as a kind of a parish church for London itself, not just for the biggest city on the planet at the time, and rapidly becoming the most powerful city on the planet, but the heart and the network of the associations of meanings and intents that London, Britain, and the Empire would be about. It's like if you could write a poem about the destiny of the British Empire in stone, and then make people walk around in it and worship in it and pray in it, generate their spiritual exaltation in it. It looks like St. Paul's. Quite deliberately, as part of Wren's scheme, he wanted to create that kind of world, and he knew that to create that kind of world, you needed to have a church at the heart of it, driving it, giving people a focus. And here we see it. We cut back to, then we get Tom's voiceover. When we first met, I promised you a secret, a fine secret. And the secret that Tom says is the secret of cities. Our world is sick, boy, very sick. A virus got in a long time ago, and we've got so used to its effects, we've forgotten what it was like before we became ill. Okay, so Wetiko, the Wendigo. This is like Western greed consciousness as an invasive entity that literally lives inside us, lives inside our veins, like midichlorians. It's so nice to have an excuse to talk about those guys twice in one episode. Yeah, the Wetiko, or the greed virus, is an entity that squats inside your being. This is like a quite common way of describing the way that archontic power structures exist as entities that occupy the human, much in the way that this pigeon is occupying Dane for the time being, or that the pigeon devils occupy the black-eyed children, black-eyed kids, the beaks. I'm talking about cities. See, human cultures were originally homeostatic. They existed in a self-sustaining equilibrium with no notions of time and progress like we've got. This is sketchy anthropology, sketchy social history, but, it's not that wrong. It's just a bit kind of agentic, just kind of puts a thing there where there doesn't need to be. That's kind of the issue with these kind of interpretations of time and history, that there is a thing there driving it all to happen rather than it being a blind, chaotic process of just a lump of protoplasm finding its way any way it can. Then the city virus got in. No one's really sure where it came from or who brought it to us, but like all viral organisms, its one directive is to use up all available resources in producing copies of itself. More and more copies, and we get this, so we've got a kind of like a kind of a early agricultural human settlement here, developing as human civilization does to this kind of like Greco-Roman portico columns, lion guardians, sphinx guardians, more on those in a minute, early city, if you like, and then obviously, so this here, somewhere between here and here, Sumer, S-U-M-E-R, Sumer is a coming in, yeah, like I said earlier. And then progressing into the chief global city, as it was in 94 when this was made, which was New York, obviously. And we see a shot of Manhattan Island here, and the Twin Towers. Eerily enough. So this kind of this identification of cities with as like an alien invading force that separates humans from their kind of otherwise natural nature is like the essence of like Gnosticism, almost of Gnostic thought. One of them, Gnosticism, is obviously very slippery. I think I mentioned that before, but of there being a part of human sensibility driving our evolution and progress, which is other to us, which is satanic, really. It's kind of like as in godly, but Satan. So like, there's God, he's real, but he's gone, and the gap left behind is Satan, and it's an invader making us do stuff that we obviously shouldn't do because cities are dirty and horrible. There's more like cities. I quite like cities, but cities. Have you ever seen the word Ixat glowing in the night? That's one of the holy names. I have not tried to use the magic word of Ixat in the post-Uber era. I wonder if it works. Still. Cities have their own way of talking to you. Catch sight of the reflections of a neon sign and it'll spell out a magic word that summons strange dreams. Ixat used to work in the... it works at night. It works in London. It works at night time. And it works if you need it. Those appear to be the rules for the Ixat summoning as I remember it being. And as I trialled it many times. Literally, if you need it to work, if it's like, oh shit, I am fucked if I don't get a taxi right now, you close your eyes, put your hand up in the air, say Ixat, and then look up. And in 100% of cases where it was, if you're just doing it because you're lazy, it's probably not going to work. If you're doing it because you need to get a taxi in that moment, like you probably need it, it'll work. 100% of the time for me, I can honestly say. But I haven't tried it since Uber come along. I think the way that digital technology makes magical affordances and magic powers redundant is going to be a theme that we will come back to. Like all of the themes, like I keep promising. Thanks for bearing with me. There's such a long way to go. We're only on issue 3. But this theory that Tom is giving to Dane, while Dane is kind of half pigeon, and when it's not quite clear, so we get this shot. I've always been really mysterioed. Mysterioed by this shot of the sort of the ancient city of the mushrooms here. I think what it's getting at is, and this is like a kind of a maxi theory of the evolution of human consciousness, which was kind of or a splicing of 2 maxi theories of the evolution of human consciousness that were very sort of trendy at this time. One is basically Terence McKenna's kind of ideal of like the panspermia stroke logos, which is basically magic mushroom, like mushrooms are a third form of life, right? They are not human, they're not animal, and they're not vegetable. But they're here. They bear, and I think subsequent biological research is or genetic research has borne this out, in that the genome of mushrooms, or most fungi, many fungi, as well as the genome of some certain types of octopi, if not all octopi, squids, magic 5D squids, are so dissimilar to all of the other genomes on planet Earth that they maybe don't come from here. That it kind of is very difficult to see a shared origin point between human DNA and mushroom DNA. So the mushroom DNA is an outsider, or we are, or there's been an intervention, right, UFO guys, and that's made animal DNA different, human DNA. But basically, mushrooms come from outer space. This isn't quite, I don't know if it's true, I'm not a scientist. My understanding is that mushroom spores on another planet are very hardy things. They could easily, eventually, we're talking over, we've got trillions of years, and we've got, or maybe just billions of years. We've got billions of years and trillions of microscopic mushroom spores. And yeah, you know what? They can escape from the gravitational pull of their home planet, float through Earth for billions of years, and land somewhere else and spawn. And that sounds freaking ridiculous, but you're dealing with timescales and probabilities, just like sheer massive numbers of stuff doing stuff, that it's got to be, sounds possible. So this is like the alien mushroom. This bit here is like the alien mushroom city that grew, shot its spores into space, and eventually they landed on Earth. They got in, they turned into mushrooms. Animals ate the mushrooms. Animals tripped out on the mushrooms. Remember the blue mold from the previous issue? Blue, it's mold. It's one of these outer spacey things. And the psychedelic consciousness thing creates language, creates human ideas of progress and separation and civilization, with all of the double-edged swordiness that implies, right? So we get cool cars, but we also get climate change, you know? We get cool cities, but we also get homeless, you know, we just get homelessness and all the dirt and crime, you know, all the bad stuff about cities, but we get the good stuff too. But probably we'd all be a lot happier if we were living in the homeostatic, self-sustaining, equilibrium style human cultures. Really, we'd just be better if we did that. But the mushroom spore virus got here. We ate it. It was cool. It tripped us out. But it's given us a lot of weird ideas that we're now living through. And, you know, so humans create cities to absorb resources, and the destiny of humanity, tell Elon Musk, is to take the idea of the city, of the urban, as a condition, off of our planet and onto other ones, and to use up all available resources in the process of doing that, okay? Like a virus. This also, you might be thinking of this point of this is kind of isomorphic, if not entirely identical to William Burroughs' idea of culture and language as transmissible objects from outside as well, right? This notion that humans are kind of burdened by self-awareness, by consciousness, by language, if you like, and it kind of distorts and deforms us, and is like an alien invader. It's like an alien fucking with you, making you a slave. Like the alien invasion has happened, and it's language or it's consciousness, which is hugely terrifying. It can apply to words. It can apply to literal magic mushrooms, or in Morrison's scheme here, or the invisible scheme, cities. This kind of drive to gather human resources and turn them into fuel for technological progress, and then take them off planet and onto a new one. Just kind of, you know, mechanical, mindless reproduction, which takes generations and lives on through millions of ultimately irrelevant human individuals. That's what cities do. But those of us who know the secret ways those of us who know the secret learn ways to unlock the power in cities. We make a pact with them, and they give us gifts in return. So yeah, basically cities are the same as, in Tom's formulation here, demons, the spirits of the dead, spirits of your ancestors, all the magic things that the sorcerer has, you know, bargains with, trucks with, in order to survive, to get power, to get new ideas, to be able to do the things they want to do with. And I think that's what the big picture of the mushrooms is about. I don't think it's in pigeon vision. You see, the pinks and the earth tones, the citrines that Danny Vozzo and Electric Crayon have worked so hard on here, are not in pigeon vision. They're not all red and fish-eyed or pigeon-eyed like Pigeon Cam is. Yeah, got more creepy looks of Dane with his black eyes. I think I'm right in saying, yeah, no, it's what happens. You sort of get it on this page, actually. You know how, like, time has passed and we've, like, potentially, this is going back a few pages, time has passed and we're, like, months into the future now from where we were. We're in the spring and we were maybe at Christmas beforehand. Dane's spots have cleared up. Or his cold sores, you know, his facial herpes. It's gone. This is kind of thanks to Tom. His survival skills are a bit better. He's getting a bit better nutrified through the hardships of street living, and his skin's a bit better, which is kind of thanks to Tom's tutelage, and frankly a relief. He's looking lovely again. So the pigeon comes back after its little sojourn around the city of London. There's a cool picture here of a pigeon. It's a dove. Of a pigeon bringing God's eyes back to him. So there you've got a picture of a pigeon with like normal eyes, which is funny. Just a pigeon. He looks, a pigeon with like a Scouse accent or whatever. And he can see himself coming back in. He's been on his spirit journey. He's been on his kind of like a shamanic journey to the spirit world. And he's coming back, and him and the pigeon exchange ideas again. You notice that, like, not much comes for free. But Dane did sacrifice, talking about the nutrition and how it was important to making Dane himself again. Dane did have to sacrifice his lunch in order to have this blessed vision of, it's not very blessed, it was kind of horrible, but to have this vision of what's really going on and what the meaning of the city of London actually is. Oh, and also he's learnt to empathise with pigeons. You'll not kick pigeons again so fast. I'm not saying that you need to like become an ornithologist and spend your weekends in like a shed out on the moors waiting to see like a lesser spotted plover or whatever. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying bird watching, but I am saying watch birds. Wherever you live, there's some birds around. Make an effort to notice them, and you'll get better at being you. You'll get better at magic. Trust. Just pay attention to the birds. Just feed them. It will teach you all sorts of things about thinking. Over the page, they're still talking about that. So Dane has had a pretty far out time. They're on Tower Bridge now. Tower Bridge. And they're walking. So they were north of the river. So they're walking south of the river now. But I don't know if they are, I think they just kind of go on Tower Bridge because it's Tower Bridge. And it's kind of, they're kind of doing the tourist trail a little bit. Seeing the sights and stuff. Obviously, Bridge is a good place for magicians to hang out and look at the beautiful river Isis again, as we've discussed, it's previously called. Also, this black Lamborghini, I think it is. I wonder whether that's somebody's car. I wonder, I think that might be the automobile equivalent of the black lady with the green beanie hat jogging in the park. Lambo, not Lamborghini, that sounds so old. It's a Lambo. Meanwhile, we must make allies of the tower. He's still talking about urban magic, right? He's still talking about how to talk, to understand and commune with the hidden power currents that exist within urban environments in order to become a magician, in order to gain insights and powers that help you live your life a bit more happily, or a bit more authentically, a bit more in the room, in the city. All of this stuff, it's fairly well documented now, but at the time, this was in the mid-90s, this was a new paradigm for magical practice. Magic is about sorcery, Wicca, paganism. It's all about connecting with nature, green things and muddy things. But that recreates a less than entirely useful dichotomy around what is authentic and inauthentic nature. There's no such thing as an inauthentic nature. It's all just nature, even if it looks like it's been made by a man, even if it looks grey and dirty and doesn't immediately fill you with, the joys of spring. The city is there to be interpreted and used as a magical power source. And this is what they're talking about. Tower Bridge, it is the kind of the power point between monarchical power and financial power. And it separates and connects them, yeah? But mainly connects them, while also kind of existing as a fortification in its own right. Like, we're trying not to use the word liminal spaces, although, it's a useful word to have. This being a bridge is literally liminal. But Tower Bridge is quite remarkable in bridges. There can't be many bridges which have literally got like a fort on each end that just protects the bridge as a as a part of liminal space itself, right? And that bridge doesn't just connect one side of the river to the other. It connects not like the seat of monarchical power, because that's Buckingham Palace further west, but like the monarchical state's military power, kind of like, or disciplinary power, kind of disciplinary power, with the city where the money flows and the decisions are made. That's what Tower Bridge does. And Dane is like still quite freaked out. Did I really turn into a pigeon? Did I really turn into a pigeon? I mean, how did it happen? Was it real? It was more like a dream. You always ask the same thing. When you dream, what makes you think it's not real? It's a fucking dream. You can't touch it, can you? Well, have you ever shaken the hands of the man who reads the news on the telly at night? I don't think that's a great analogy. You can believe that the man on the telly is real without having to have physical contact. The point is, the spaces that we journey to in our dreams, the experiences that we have in dream or other forms of consciousness, other forms of altered consciousness, have an ontological validity of their own, which matters and which can do stuff. That's what Tom's getting at in his kind of poetical way. You'll have your own opinion about that. Have an opinion about it. Over the page. So, like I say, I think they might have just been visiting Tower Bridge to visit Tower Bridge, because I'm pretty sure, I should have checked this beforehand, but I'm trying to skirt around this location. I'm pretty sure they're back north of the river. We're a spoiler-free podcast, so the next two pages creates some issues for me. This is St Dunstan's in the east, and it's north of the river. So they were on St James's. They were in St James's Park. Thanks to my buddy Andrew for pointing this one out to me. But St James's Park, right next to Whitehall and Downing Street and Buckingham Palace, as I said earlier, St James's Park is where spies go to meet in the movies, in George Smiley novels, to sit on a park bench and like sneakily talk to each other, because they can't be asked to go very far. They just go to the nearest park, which is St James's Park, and they sit on a bench and pretend to feed the pigeons, and they say Nightingale to Charlie 1 and swap secret messages like that. It happens in St James's Park. The kind of the spy fiction vibe, the spy-fi vibe in The Invisibles is why we think it's St James's. Okay, so they went from St James's, where they had the pigeon trip, to Tower Bridge. Normally you would be going south of the river if you were going to cross the bridge at that point. I think they maybe just went to the bridge and then came back again, and didn't spend much time south of the river, because they're back north of the river now at St Dunstan's in the east. How do I know that it's called St Dunstan's in the east when it doesn't say that here? Well, you can kind of identify it. Yowell's work. I don't know at what point I'm supposed to talk about From Hell, chapter 8, I think it is. Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell's From Hell. It is a brilliant sort of opus about psychogeography as a practice, and psychohistoriogeography as a practice and as a way of thinking about the world, told in Alan Moore's typically brilliantly lucid style of making fairly esoteric concepts just seem kind of obvious and normal and natural. The issue of From Hell that I'm talking about. Half of the stuff that I've been saying for the past hour is roughly that. But there's a really big difference between Eddie Campbell's imagining of London as a magical space and Steve Yowell's. And Yowell's is much more kind of fluid and much less kind of nailed on, much more sort of impressionistic. However, apart from this place in St James's Park, which looks a bit just like that one there, which just looks a bit like just generic old buildings. Some of these buildings, like the way they've drawn these buildings, is kind of beautiful in terms of its clarity, and you can say this is in Dunstan's in the east because I know what it looks like, and we'll find out later. there is that as well. Tom and Dane are talking about Harmony House. Harmony House. They're swinging on the swings. Playground, playing. Dane likes to play. It's where kids go with their parents, the park. And then suddenly these guys just rock up out of nowhere. And they say all sorts of interesting stuff. Dane says, and the dialogue works really nicely here, they're talking about Harmony House and the goodies versus the baddies, the dark forces who would rule this planet. And Dane's like, what do you mean, the devil or something? And as he says the devil, these two people emerge and say, we have Pan and Dionysus on our side, Freddy dear. So these people are maybe devil worshippers. Pan and Dionysus both being like horned animal gods, don't really fit the kind of the Judeo-Christian mode of what Satan is, but obviously, inform the look. Satan's a very fashionable guy. He's bit most of his stees from Pan and Dionysus, a bit of a combo of both. Goatee lads, big haunches, yeah? And we must be incandescent when we face the Harlequin. Anything less than that will be fatal, says this elegantly sort of 20s dress woman here. This guy, she's with, that's easy for you to say. I'm not sure I like it here. It feels haunted. Suddenly Tom's got a very sort of wistful look on his face and rattles off another one of his Lear lines. Frateretta calls me and tells me Nero is an angler in the lake of darkness. Like the Emperor Nero in hell. I think this is from Dante or something. Emperor Nero in hell fishing. But, it's a hell lake, so he's pulling up bad stuff. The Emperor Nero not being one of your better Roman emperors. Lord knows, not that many of them are great. But he whispers one of his favourite lines of dialogue to himself. Maybe, thinking about the way that he's layered himself up upon himself. Remember, it's terribly important that we prepare the hand of glory here, darling. Hand of glory, yeah, is like the hand of a murderer. And you can use them to cast magic spells, which make people fall asleep. That's another Wicker Man reference, right? That's the second Wicker Man reference of the issue. On page 15. We're only on page 15. I've been going for hours. I'm so sorry. Let's rattle through the rest. We've got this guy here again. They have a little chat. Basically, you know how the structure of these issues goes now. You get these kind of like, these little eruptions of stuff which doesn't quite make sense. And it's obviously just seeding stuff for future issues. And indeed, this is what that's doing. Surely you're not afraid of an old man and a little boy. I've become afraid of everything. The angler in the lake of darkness. And then Tom says again, pray the innocent, beware the foul fiend. We'll leave this section for now. And now they're heading, so they were at Sinders and East, and now they're heading, I don't think it works, right? They're heading, you can tell that they're walking west along the riverside, so we can't really, they're dotting around, they're kind of leaping around in space and time, right? We can't track their journey because they don't have one. They didn't walk anywhere, they're just comic characters. They're just guys they're just drawings. But we can tell now that they've gone. They were in eastwards of the city. Now they're westwards again, but they're heading east, past Cleopatra's Needle, near the site of the current Millennium Bridge, which wouldn't have been built back then. City's full of magic, neither bad nor good, just there to be used by the people who know. They start to talk about Jack Frost. They talk about the Invisibles. You're one of them, aren't you? Same as that bald guy, King Mob. There's a war on, boy. There's a war on, and we want you. We want you as a new recruit. So Tom is he's just laying it on the line for Dane here now. Sometimes you hear distant rumblings or glimpse bomb light reflected in faraway windows. On one side there's the Invisibles, on the other, well, it's not my job to tell you. You'll find out soon. So we're getting the back plot of the whole thing kind of spelled out here. It's goody magic versus baddie magic, but they're cops and robbers, or they're anarchists and the state, or they're goodies and bad. It's that goody. It's all that. And they're walking past Cleopatra's Needle. Now, Cleopatra's Needle came up in like 1880, 1886, or was it 1880? There's one in London, there's one in Paris. The Western big cities, basically at the end of the 19th century, nicked them from Egypt because they're cool, and said, we'll have those. This is one of the most obvious expressions of solar-phallic patriarchal male power that one can have. It's ancient, it's groovy, it's powerful. We're nicking it, we're sticking it in our city next to the river. It creates a wonderful conjunction of elements that lets us do what we want, right? This is just a power play. It's a big symbol of temporal and magical power. And again, we've got this nice grid work that Steve Yoles got his ruler out for. We're in Earth again, right? This is Earth feeling stuff. And we get a glimpse of the hieroglyphs that are written on one side of the west-facing surface. Sorry, yeah, just going through the compass points in my head of Cleopatra's Needle on the riverside, on the north bank. This here, I've kind of looked. This isn't real hieroglyphics on the side of Cleopatra's Needle. This is just some drawings of hieroglyphs that Steve Yoles has just kind of done. But, you know, that's not to say that it's not worth Googling, is it? One of the things that it says on one of the sides, I think this side, but it's, you know, bear with me, of Cleopatra's Needle, this ancient obelisk which was shipped in at great expense, and, you know, people died in the process of doing it. And how the hell do you get a massive piece of stone, like one of the biggest pieces of stone in the world, that's been kind of worked by human hands? How the hell do you move that in one piece from Egypt to London? It's like, just the act of doing it is a huge sign of, like, disposable resources. And they were disposable, bless them. But anyway, yeah, the hieroglyphics, one of the bits of the hieroglyphic says, Horus, powerful bull, beloved of Ra, king of Upper and Lower Egypt, Ra-Men Khepra. We know Khepra, the beetle guy, from the very first page of the first issue of The Invisibles. His father, Tum, has set up for him a great name, with increase of royalty, in the precinct of Heliopolis, the city of the sun, giving him the throne of Seb, the dignity of Khepra, son of the sun, Thothmes, the holy, the just, beloved of the Bennu, and of an ever-living... of An, ever-living. I'm really good at reading my own handwriting. I did actually write it down, though. Didn't just copy-paste it. So, yeah. Birds. Yeah, the Bennu bird is one of the kind of the totemic bird spirits being invoked by the power of the ancient Egyptian empires themselves. Okay? One of the ways that Egypt, ancient Egypt, as we kind of stupidly think of it, this kind of mishmash of lots of civilizations over a very long time, that nevertheless created things that are unparalleled in human experience before or since. One of the lads they talked to in order to get this done was this guy called the Bennu bird. We've got a lot of bird spirits happening in this issue as well. And of course, Horus, who we're going to find out more about later, because he pops up in the Invisibles Trust. And they wander down the riverside onto one of the beaches, one of these horrible, stinking, muddy beaches, like you do get at low tide on the Thames, the River Isis. And they start talking about Jack Frost and Dane's family situation. Okay, so we've been talking about father energies. We've been talking about, you know, Dane. He fucked off when I was about 5. He couldn't stand my mum, and there was no work for him in Liverpool. I don't remember him. So Dane was brought up without a dad. That's kind of come with its usual issues. You know, you can not have a dad and be okay. It's okay. But telly and films and comics, they kind of go, well, this will explain a few bits of character about him. And maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. But it makes sense, you know, it fits an understanding of narrative and character and of humanity that we have. If you haven't got a dad, don't worry. You don't. It's not. It's all right. It's not. It's not lost. You're you. You'll be fine. So they talk about Dane's family, his family background, his lack of a father, the fact that it's maybe given him a few issues with authority, you know, all that kind of thing. And also that maybe in this void where a father would be, Dane has created something else called Jack Frost. Now, I don't think it's terribly clear here, but I'm gonna tell you something now. You've worked it out, but I'm gonna tell you too. Jack Frost is the thing that Dane saw in issue 1 when he was sitting by the Mersey, or just the canal perhaps, and he saw the Beatles, when he saw Stu Sutcliffe and John Lennon. Remember, there's like the kind of the Judder Man looking guy who kind of comes along and talks at Dane for a bit. That's Jack Frost. That's the psychic construct of you know, a kind of a power figure that Dane has created in his subconscious for the lack of having a dad. It's all a bit... It's good storytelling. Although, actually, it hasn't been tied together terribly well. You know, as an explanation for our character Dane's psychology and his kind of like special destiny, it's fine. It's just not terribly clear here that, you know, remember that thing back in issue 1? We're talking about that now. That's not terribly clear. Wouldn't have hurt to have had, you know, a little bit of Jack Frost, spiky hair, kind of like hovering in the background while they're talking about this. And Dane is playing with the blank badge again that he found in the alleyway back at the start of this issue. And they go down into the mud. Okay, so again, remember the bit about the upper and the lower Nile, the upper and lower Egypt that we were talking about? Remember how everything we know about Egyptian culture comes about the vast agricultural wealth that was given to them by the fact that the Nile would flood and recede every year, bringing with it, you know, a whole new fertile plain to grow a surplus of food on, which allowed them then to build these massive pyramids. Or did it? Anyway, and they've gone down into the mud flats of the river themselves, of the river Isis, remember, the secret name of the Thames. And Tom punches Dane in the head again. It's quite funny. And he's cross now. Tom is kind of pushing Dane. What this is basically, they go through a very impromptu and kind of al fresco version of psychodynamic therapy. So rather than like kind of psychotherapy where the therapist kind of allows, you know, like coaxes, but allows the therapy allows the kind of the subject to say what's, you know, not just on their mind but in their mind. There are other more kind of active, this is like a very 60s kind of oh goodness me, R.D. Lang and his school of psychotherapy thing. You prod quite actively, quite aggressively. You start to pull the subconscious out of the subject, and you do it aggressively. You do it physically if you have to, because that knocks them sideways. That takes them out of their mind and allows their emotions to kind of break out a little bit, and to get to the bottom of things, to dig out the subconscious rather than letting it sit in there festering, kind of unrecognised and ununderstood. And one of the techniques of doing this also is fear. And, you know, Tom did this a bit in the last issue as well, but he goes into like scary Yoda mode and is kind of bullying Dane into lowering his defences, or kind of smashing his defences really, in order to get him to open up, to literally kind of dump all of the psychological clutter and, you know, spiritual damage that his frightening childhood gave him. Not his frightening childhood, his lonely and insecure childhood gave him. You know, there's issues here, you know, like kind of post-Freudian psychotherapy is built around making sure that the family is like a reproducible bourgeois unit, right? That you've got a family unit which can create workers who are healthy and smart enough to go out and work. But Dane doesn't come from that kind of family, and that doesn't make him psychologically broken. It just means that his kind of family setup isn't built for the kind of existence that. And I think this goes a bit, and I only say this because Tom uses this to kind of tease him. Cause trouble for a little while, screw some tart, raise more robots, and on and on and on. But Dane's like class existence and background places him outside of that circuitry a little bit. He doesn't. So they go through this, and then he starts to drown him in the river, and we get, our angle tilts here. We're not using our red colorings, but we are getting that kind of fisheye effect as Dane, he's properly knocking him about. He's hit him a few times, and this is quite a superhero kind of bash there. And Dane flies into the river, and Tom starts to like drown him. Like it's a ritualized baptism, right? All of the, not his sins, but the psychological junk inside Dane that make him such a unreconstructed little rotter, is being washed off and beaten out of him and scared out of him by this intervention from Tom. Dane starts to panic, right? His mate is being horrible to him. He's just swallowed a load of Thames water. I hope they've got some antibiotics on hand because it's really not clean. And he's crawling around in the mud, yeah? So, like, remember, the river rising, the mud coming up onto the surface, the kind of the dirt of the subconscious rising up and leaving behind a fertile plain, a plain of great richness and potential and good growth. That's why this is happening down here on the mud flat here. Dane starts crying. He can't breathe. It's kind of somewhere between a panic attack and, according to the theory of this stuff, like a muscle armoring, like your so when you feel anxious, you hunch up, and those kind of that kind of habits of your muscles are in your chest, and so that kind of relationship between emotions and musculature works back the other way, right? So you can manipulate your emotions through manipulating your chest. So that's part of it's not all of it, but that's part of what breathing is about. It's part of why you have a panic attack. It's not just about blood oxygenation, although obviously that's a big part of it. Dane starts to freak out. Tom tells him to relax, and then all of a sudden, Dane's being is pierced by his being. His body is pierced. His hand, his palm, that one, is pierced by, his left hand is pierced by the badge. Remember the blank badge that he was playing with earlier? The blank badge is worn by John Lennon. It's the calling card of the Invisibles. There's an interview where, on record somewhere, it's quite hard to find actually. It wasn't hard to find for a bit, but it's quite hard to find now. That's because Google's just been kind of businessed out of usefulness. You just find people trying to flog you John Lennon badges. But John Lennon, our guy, our kind of our patron saint of this first few issues of The Invisibles, wore a blank badge in the late 60s when he was still in the Beatles. And he was asked about it on camera once, and there are some really cool photos of him like quite conspicuously wearing one. And this is the calling card of invisibilism. It's a mirror, says Tom. The badge is a mirror. What do you see? Look at yourself in the mirror. What do you see? And then we get, what the Steve Yoel's holiday page. Take a day off, Steve. That page draws itself. He's having trouble breathing. He's having oral hallucinations. There's nothing there. The lesson, I guess, my saying it and it being kind of, even if it is intellectually lucid, which I'm not promising, is that when you look into the construct of what your self is, of what your identity is, of the mechanisms that make you behave the way you do, the ego that drives them, and the things that structure and fuel the thoughts and feelings that you have are nothing. It's a blankness. It's a space. There's nothing in the mirror beyond what your perception of things puts in there. Having been brought terribly low, washed, baptized in dirty water, frightened, terrorized, beaten, psychologically broken down, all of the scaffolding that creates Dane's sense of who he is has gone, and it's left this blankness. And that's what happens. But he reaches a kind of he's sort of bullied into apotheosis by Tom's rather awesome mix of psychotherapy, magic, and kind of, weaponized father surrogacy, mentoring. He just does the guru thing on Dane, and kind of saves him, and it's kind of lovely for all of its slightly chewy dialogue. It's rather lovely, and suddenly all that chewy dialogue stops, and we get this, a page which, if nothing else, stops you in your tracks, stops the flow of the reading experience so thoroughly. Of course, the way it bleeds into, see here, the way it bleeds into the gutters. We've been talking about stuff happening between the spaces of the panels, and you see this, right? You get this blank page of existence for our comic book characters to wander on, to draw themselves into, and it breaks the reading experience so thoroughly. And this is not a terribly impressionistic comic. This is a action comic, yeah. This is like a Vertigo young adult thing, and then it suddenly just makes you stop, and it provokes thought. It makes you go into yourself and come out of yourself a bit at the same time, and it's kind of bold, really. It's kind of bold to throw in a blank page like that. Over the page, Shadowfall. Afraid of your own shadow? You should be. Go back like a mere 2 pages to the kind of the beginning of this initiation breakdown sequence. I'm a nightmare boy. I'm the tiger in the rain tearing you out of your car. I'm one holy fucking terror. Afraid of your own shadow. So literally on the flip side of the white apotheosis egoless enlightenment page, you see what that is in reverse, which is the shadow, like the Jungian shadow, like the kind of the self which is unrecognized by the self, by the conscious self. That's like, this is why there's something genuinely quite spooky about the Invisibles, because the adverts, and this is why I'm doing this read through, this Invisibles podcast, using these issues, because these adverts are eerily in the text and contributing to the way you read things. On that note, actually, I should have said this earlier. I'm really sorry. The kindly ones. This is right in the middle of Dane's ritual rebirth experience. His kind of like psychodynamic Reichian therapy urban style session. This advert from Neil Gaiman is at and Teddy Christensen's Sandman. I think this is like the last Sandman book. These are the kindly ones. We have the triple-headed goddess here, who are menacing our boy Morpheus, the sand guy from the Matrix. The other Sandman, there's a lot of sand guys advertised in this issue. Sleep and Dream, but also what's the name of the Fates? What is it in Greek? Is it like the Erinyes or something? But they are the Greek goddesses who do family vengeance. When one's family has been wronged, or when one has wronged one's family, the Erinyes are the aspect of goddess who come calling to collect the debt and, well, collect the debt, to punish you for it. Those are the kindly ones. Those are the guys who Morpheus has got to deal with in the final book of his epic story, the Sandman. You know about the Sandman. You're watching a comics podcast, for God's sake. But do you see how it ties into the themes of family wronging, of promises broken within the family history? So again, it's not as perfectly on the nose as the flip side of enlightenment being the shadow, the light and the dark. It's not quite as perfectly on the nose as that, but it is thematically of a piece with the thing that Dane's going through, is this Sandman advert. And the colours are brilliant on it as well. Obviously they'll spring for money for a Sandman advert, because that's where all the money is. But that's a beautiful bit of work by the colouring team there. They're not credited, which is a shame. I don't think that Teddy Christensen would have done it himself. But look at the purples and the mauves on there. Lovely stuff. So yeah, so the adverts in the Invisibles are really good and important, and they enrich your reading of the text. If you want to know what this blank badge thing is all about, it's about confronting your shadow self, okay? Dane, how do you feel? Dane is then in the mud. He's going to stink. He's going to really smell. And he'll get ill. I think Tom probably has got like a pact going on with the various lethal microorganisms that live in the mud and the water on the Thames side. Not just the microorganisms, but the poisons. I suspect Tom has cut a deal with them and can sort Dane out. So don't worry about him too much. He's going to be okay. He feels like he's on E, but it's real. He feels fucking amazing. He's got this beatific grin on his face. He's been through this like death and rebirth trauma, and he's out of it. He's been through this initiator experience. He's seen the light of day again. He's understood the void at the heart of the self. He has understood that void at the heart of existence and seen how beautiful the light that it casts can be. And he feels pretty fucking cool about himself. And him and Tom have a big hug. They made you forget how to feel, right? So remember how, like, what I was saying about how the chest, like, the emotions are constricted in there? You forget how to feel. You don't get emotions the right way when you're all blocked up in the chest like that. In the heart. Literally in the heart. But Tom has broken that open for Dal. He's broken down his heart barriers. Everything new, and the sun itself spinning behind your ribs, filling you up with silver. Like the way it was before they made robots of us, sentenced to a life behind bars we're trained to set in place ourselves. So this is kind of hippie shit, right? The only man holding you back is you, man. And while that's not 100% true, it's not a terrible lesson in life either. It's like the first time, it's like somebody's washed everything. It's all right to cry, isn't it? If I fucking want to, it's all right. This is a big deal for a horrible little scrote like Dane to be saying about the world. Cry when you must, laugh when you can, shout, scream, run, fly kites, live. And Tom and Dane are just brilliant at this point. It's impossible not to just think that they're like the greatest double act in comics. And I can't wait to see what the rest of their adventures is. And they go, and Dane is like, he's properly like on one. He's really grinning. Look at that. This is totally fucking mad. Because to be alive is to accept death. That's the price we pay. I've shown you life. Now I'll take you to meet death. Huh? Now I'll take you to meet death. See Canary Wharf Tower? Remember Canary Wharf Tower from the Dragon Line stuff on the last issue? Issue 2? We're going to go up there and we're going to jump off the top. So, you know how we've been talking about exalted phallic energies? This is the big one. You know how we've been talking about these lines, which are like the bars of the prison that one builds within one's heart, the shape of the emotions cramming into those muscles and crushing them and inhibiting your ability to experience your own sense of who you are and how you feel. We're all over them all of a sudden. They're going to climb to the top of Canary Wharf, the heart of where these, not just these dragon energies, but these earth lines that hold you down onto the earth are, and they're going to jump off the top. And we, just in case you hadn't noticed that this whole issue was about obelisks and what that generative power can do, both kind of negatively inside and positively, or at least powerfully, outside. You know, all of the stuff about St. Paul's and the Lloyd's building these are all just manifestations of solar-phallic power. What they can do, how powerful they can be, how positive and negative inside and outside they are. That's what this issue's been about. We've learned a hell of a lot about Dane, who he is and where he's going. For the first time, we really think that this is a guy that we can definitely not just be amused by spending time with, but get behind. A guy that we can kind of believe in, if you like. And now they're going to go to the top of Canary Wharf and jump off the top and kill themselves. Wouldn't recommend it, guys. And have a wash before you go. You've seen it already, so you know this is a young adult comic. And so remember from last time, we've got the advert for Tim Hunter, the semi-automatic Harry Potter of DC Vertigo, who can't stop touching himself and is always fascinated by the electric blue jizz on his hand. After he's had another first masturbation experience. The other adverts, Batman vs Predator. I haven't read Batman vs Predator 2. I haven't read it. I enjoyed the first Batman vs Predator a lot, but for some reason I never got into the second one. This is not Paul Gulassi's finest work, I would go so far as to say, the artist on this shot here. Especially Huntress's wonky boobs. Not keen on that. But, you know, the docks, yeah, this is taking place just from the riverside. So we've got Magic Boy finding his power. We've got something strange or something new crawling out of the docks. We've got John Constantine here, Urban Magic. This has been a very Urban Magic issue. And on the back page, Moon Shadow. The Boy Who Flew Too Far. This is like an Icarus thing. I guess I haven't read Moon Shadow, but I'm thinking Icarus here. There's Daedalus. And again, we're talking about less than entirely positive father-son relationships. All of these adverts make sense. And then, I don't know, if you know anything about American football, maybe these guys have all got daddy issues too, or you know, maybe maybe American football is a triumph of solar-phallic energies over the flat green grass of Mother Earth, AstroTurf. I don't know. You can do it if you need to. Ultra hot packs are here. So the adverts and everything, they all still make sense. There's no letters page or Grant Morrison doing a bit of editorial page this week. There is this On the Ledge editorial from Shelley Roberg, now known as Shelley Bond, of course, who, you know, the Vertigo Rave. Remember the Vertigo Rave that was advertised in the last issue with the flyer? She goes in and talks about that. There's some stuff about the Invisibles in there. Not directly, but there is, if I'm right, there's like an entire 5 pages of invisible stuff in the Vertigo Rave that you can't get anywhere else. I'm going to have to try and find that, and I'll bring it to you as like a special issue of this, the Invisibles podcast. The Invisible podcast, not the Invisibles podcast. I got the name of my own podcast wrong. These are all of the other Vertigo books that are coming out this month, and in the listing for this very issue, which is written in the back here, Dane's initiation into the secret society continues with glimpses of past Invisibles operatives. Past Invisibles operatives? That's a spoiler, because there's nothing like... It's got to be them, because there's literally nobody else in the issue. And you know, they're dressed like they're from the past. So they're old Invisibles, but... We'll get to that later. It's great when a plot point, which is fairly obscure or kind of at least mysterious and enigmatic and makes you think, is just confirmed by the solicitation that they put in the back of the book. Okay, I've been going on again for way too long. I'm so sorry. If you're still here, thanks for hanging on. Love your work. Love you too. And I'll be back next time. Join me in a month's time. We're doing Invisibles issue 4 next time. In the meantime, keep an eye out for the new issue of The Shadow Trap. Keep an eye out for the new episode of Diane, which we're finally going to get around to doing. Go to Patreon. Give me $1, just $1. I mean, $1 every month, but give me $1. I've been sitting here for ages. And thanks. Hope you had a good time. Feedback, comments, tell me to shut up. Point out things that I've got wrong. Do all of the excellent feedbacky stuff that a wonderful beautiful, smashing, invisible. I know it's not a podcast, by the way. Yeah, tell me that it's not a podcast, that it's just like a YouTube video that you're doing, you loser. I don't mind. There's not as much fun in a invisible video. Invisible podcast, invisible... Anyway, thanks ever so much for listening. Sorry for this bit at the end, this stupid ramble. And I'll see you soon. Bye.